Yeah, it's a pretty hard question to answer, Bev, because we saw the ruble plummet, up to 40% after the current sanctions were announced. I think I came on and talked to you about it at the time, and I was kind of surprised at really the magnitude of those sanctions. On paper, they're absolutely very extreme, and we'd expect a very extreme response, a very extreme effect on the Russian economy. What we have seen since then is pretty curious. So the ruble, the Russian currency, has regained all of the lost ground that it initially lost in that 40% decline. And that's led a lot of people to wonder whether these sanctions are having the desired effect. And of course, we see the war effort continue. So, a lot of people are wondering, are they doing what we intended them to do?
And that is a really good point, because what I'm intrigued about is, also too, straight after the invasion began, there was such a united response backing Ukraine against Russia, a lot of support, a lot of military support being offered, and the threat of sanctions. But there are a lot of people, there are a lot of nations still on Russia's side. So what impact is that having on the desired outcome of these sanctions?
Yeah, so this is definitely part of it. So the idea behind the sanctions was to effectively take Russia's wallet away, prevent them from being able to pay for goods that they would import, to really prevent their economy from functioning, right? So if they want to manufacture tanks for the war effort and they can't get access to parts to put in those tanks, then you'll kind of cripple the war effort. That was really the effect, other than just generally trying to put massive pressure on the regime. Now, what we worried about was, are there ways for Russia to get around these sanctions? So we've certainly seen them step in and do a whole lot of things, right? They've acted with pretty intense policy responses, like they're banning all Russians from buying foreign currency. They're forcing all Russian businesses to convert their foreign currency into rubles to try and prop that country up. The currency up. But the other thing that we have to think about is that, are there other countries, which I think you're alluding to, that can continue to trade with Russia? So, for example, is China continuing to provide them with the products they need? India, other countries. So the trouble with Russia is we don't know, right? We don't have the level of transparency we would see with a country like Australia or the US or the UK, where we know what trade is occurring. So while I think the sanctions are having a big effect, and certainly anecdotally we see they are, it's impossible to tell at this stage whether those goods are continuing to flow into Russia, and therefore whether the sanctions have had the kind of desired effect.
Yeah. Key, many people believe, is Russian oil. Now, some EU nations are continuing to hold out just because of the practicality of not getting those supplies and what it might mean to them. Does that jeopardise the impact Ukraine is looking for that really crippling impact on Russia?
Yeah, look, so the big question is, can today Russia still get access to foreign goods to fund its economy, to keep things flowing again? Now, if it can, then it would buy those goods with the foreign currency it is amassing by selling oil and gas to Europe and the rest of the world. So if it can continue to get goods today, then shutting that supply of foreign currency off by cutting that demand would definitely shut the Russian economy down for good, right? So that's certainly the case. Now, otherwise, if they are actually, even today, if those sanctions are working, if they are preventing Russia from buying those foreign goods, then additional sanctions may not make any difference, right? I mean, the regime may be telling the Russian people that these things will only be temporary. We just have to get through it. We have to figure out alternatives. We have to adapt in the short run, hoping that they get some advantage in the war effort and trying to eke it out as far as they can. So again, on this side of the Iron Curtain, it's hard to tell at this stage, one, whether the sanctions are working, and two, whether additional elevation of those sanctions will also have the desired effect.
Yeah. So, when President Zelensky says the Russian oil, the Europeans are playing with blood money by taking Russian oil. It is interesting, as you say, because of this transparency issue. And China is another key question how they may be propping up Putin. They haven't, don't outwardly condemn his actions. So is that transparent as well? Because China, too, is not always that forthcoming.
Yeah, so that's right. I mean, we have really no idea the degree to which China is supplying goods to Russia. So that's really an unknown. Now, what I would say is one area where the sanctions definitely do have an effect is which is quite interesting, is that they prevent any goods being sold into Russia that contain American intellectual property. Right. So if a computer chip that was developed by Intel, say, has American patents, and that chip is manufactured in China or Taiwan or somewhere like that, then those companies aren't permitted to sell those goods on to Russia, right? So we have seen a number of cases, the two largest car manufacturers in Russia, for example, the largest tank manufacturer in Russia, we have seen them shut production because they can't get critical inputs. And they're exactly these kinds of things like processors. So again, the sanctions are working to some degree. Whether they need to be ramped up is unknown. I would say a couple of weeks ago, I was cautioning a little too much overreaction on the sanctions. But at that point, I think I decided, given that Russia continued to continue its war effort unabated, and now with the atrocities we see, I think it's probably worth trying an escalation, even if the West incurs costs, because I think it's worth it, just for the chance that it may, bring an end to the war.
Indeed. And I mean, India too plays an interesting game. We saw Sergei Lavrov meet with India. India's not condemning the war. How does that impact their relations and their economic relations with countries, the Quad countries, including Australia?
Yeah, it's a very tricky question. So if you look at the Indian military, for example, they source almost all of their military hardware from Russia. Right, and India, if you know the geopolitics of the region, is very keen to have quite an effective defense force against neighboring countries, so including China. Right, so the kind of the military supply that India gets from Russia is really important. They have all sorts of other economic ties, so you can kind of understand they don't want to get on the wrong side of this. But I think what that says is Australia has a really unique place here, right? In our place in the Quad, with our relationship with India via that, in trying to strengthen that relationship and trying to draw India away. Now, we already see the US, for example, has put its hand out to India to try and offer it military supply, right, so that it can offer an alternative way for the Indian military to get hardware from Russia. So I think in the medium term, Russia is isolated. I think to continue that, Australia can play actually a very important role in trying to strengthen that. And meanwhile, Bev, to be honest, I think they can do the same with China. I think we should be going out of our way to try and entice China away from that Russian relationship as much as we possibly can. And if it means maybe losing a little face in the short run, it's worth it if we can increase the chance of a peaceful outcome in Ukraine.
Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective. Stephen, you make a lot of sense for us. Thank you so much.
Cheers, Pep.